Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a valuation expert and divorce mediator in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, we will discuss how to find hidden assets and or understated income in divorce cases with Leah Weitholter, a forensic accountant, certified fraud examiner, and private investigator in Tulsa, Oklahoma. If we're looking at hidden assets, because I think that that's what people always want to know, how do you find hidden assets and what could be an example? Because I think, sometimes we're talking about things that we totally know. But a lot of times, I did have a recent client that called and they're like, I know we own some businesses, but I don't know how many. I don't know what the names are, and I think we chuckle, but it really, because we're like, well, how could you not know what's going on? But this is what's happening in divorce is that people are not keeping everybody up to speed on what's happening. So what's an example of a way that you kind of try to figure out, is there something missing?
Yeah. So, by the process that I've mentioned a couple times, just where did money come from? Where did it go? And we like to say that our clients know their story, but we know data. And so we can tell you what looks weird. And one of the reports we put together is an interesting data findings report where we say, hey, did you know that this utility, going back to my previous example, did you know that your utilities, you had 4 payments to utilities every month? Like, do you have that many meters where that would make sense? Like that, those types of things. So we put that together on this interesting data findings, and then we give that to the client because finding hidden assets is not magic. It's just knowing where to look. There's no secret database. And if there is a private investigator who's telling you, oh, I can look up your information on, this database of bank accounts, you really need to be aware. We at Workman Forensics, we do not use those types of databases. We can find the same information legally. And financial information, the way I like to explain like kind of ethics in this space is would I want somebody doing that with my information? So if you want to find something in my financial data, you can go through the courts and through the discovery process to find that information so that I know you're going to look. And then you start kind of creating this organized spider web, tracing all of these clues out from the center. But what I don't want to have is someone is checking out my bank account information and I never even knew about it through some, I don't know, something sourced through dark web or something. I don't really understand how they're getting their information on those databases. So we don't use them. But so a hidden asset, like I said earlier, yes, to the out spouse, it feels hidden. To us, we just know where to go look. And so it's not magic, it's a process. So in looking at where did money come from, where did it go, and then providing that to the client and saying, okay, client, what on here looks weird to you? From a data perspective, these are high risk, but it may be okay. There was one case where there was $100,000 spent at a jewelry store. And it was an even dollar payment too. And so, I'm like, okay, spouse, like, are you familiar with this? And she says, oh yeah, that's such and such ring. And like, she had it on. So it can be okay. But from a data perspective, that's like, oh my gosh, like, are we dealing, like, this seems juicy, and then we go talk to the client and she's like, oh no, here's the ring, it's right here. So one story that I have in mind whenever I'm thinking about people talking about hidden assets is there was this professional, and they were very familiar with how to set up companies, and they were always they're very entrepreneurial, and so they're always looking to set up different companies and different year ends, and just oh well, if we make tons of money here, we might want to defer income here. They were just always looking at these things and investments. And so the spouse had no clue. She had been raising kids and stuff, and then they decided they're going to get a divorce. The husband had time, and this is what I'm always looking for, like who filed and when did they file and when did the spouse notice that something in their behavior maybe started changing and stuff, because that sometimes is an indicator that they could have started planning for divorce. Well, so we're looking at different things, and I got involved really late in the case, which I hate, because a lot of times if I had been involved, and probably same for you, if we've been involved in the beginning, we can like help them. And there is so much emotion that I feel like a lot of times the out spouse is treated like the crazy spouse. And they're not crazy. There is a lot of truth in what they're saying, but they're so emotional because nobody's been listening because they're not the business person, and but they're usually not wrong, or not 100% wrong. Let's say that. So she keeps saying, I know that he's hiding money. I know that other partners are probably holding money for him and all this stuff. And unfortunately, on that case, it was just too late in the game. The judge wasn't going to let me look at some information that would have helped with. I do think his receivables were going to a buddy of his. I do think that still to this day, but I couldn't do anything about it. But when I looked at where did money go out of all these different bank accounts that they had, one of the things that stood out were these other related LLCs. So then that allowed us, the judge did allow us to look at the bank accounts of these related LLCs. One thing led to another, and we actually found where this guy had invested in a startup. And so whenever we're talking about that marital balance sheet and wanting to make sure that all the assets are on the balance sheet, sure, the balances of all these bank accounts are being listed, but this investment and this stock that he held in a startup, I mean, we're not talking about, stock that's being reported and, like publicly traded stock. This was in a local startup. And so, then one of my recommendations was you either have to decide, or agree to some sort of valuation and he gets to keep this, or you need to have it valued or something, but to add that asset back, to the marital balance sheet. And that's what I would have considered a hidden asset in her case, because she didn't know that he had ever even made that investment.
Yeah. And I think the hard part in divorce is that not always is everybody trying to hide things. They don't always know what's important. And we've found investment in startups just by looking at canceled checks, that a check was written for $10,000 to a certain company. And when we found out, oh, he does have ownership, he might have even forgot, because a lot of times we have like kind of chronic entrepreneurs that they're invested in a lot of different areas. They're flying so fast and so high that they're not totally keeping track. But I think an important thing to reiterate that you said is that, because we get calls all the time, they're like, okay, well, can you just access that database that tells us where everything is missing? And I'm like, well, that's not how this is working. Like, we are looking at clues in the data. We're looking at clues in the bank statements. And I think that outspouse really has to just be kind of telling us as much as they can remember. Oh, I saw a statement once and it was to Wells Fargo or Bank of America, and we don't have any accounts at Bank of America. Or I saw this other mail had a different address on it, and I didn't think that we had that address. And so a lot of times that outspouse, just by giving you all of these different pieces of a puzzle that don't match in their head, when they combine it with what you have in data, it then brings the whole picture together.